All right, so I believe the webinar has officially started. And can somebody confirm that you can see it on Facebook Live? Lydia, right now, as I guess deal with the Facebook Live, can you greet the people in the chat for us? I think Sandy Coy just said hello. So, wow, we have a lot of participants. I guess just want to say, everybody, welcome to our NABA quarterly meeting. This is our February 2021 meeting today. We're getting everything set up, so just hang on for a couple of seconds and we will start our meeting, all right? I guess while we get ready, I just want to coach people on the format. So for those of you who are not a panelist, you can respond to us through the chats. We will periodically check the chats for questions, comments, concerns, good news, and so forth. After our guest speaker presents, if you have any questions, just write that out, and then we will address those questions for the guest speaker, all right? By the way, can somebody give me a confirmation regarding the Facebook Live? There should be like a 10-second delay.
Well, I have it on my other computer.
Is it working?
It is working. It shows the chats and it shows all the officers' pictures.
Okay, it's great. All right, just
what I was saying earlier is that in order to get to it from Facebook, I had to click on join, then I had to fill in the form to register again.
Okay, well, hey, it works. This is our first time. I'm taking baby steps. Just want to say, panelists, make sure you control your mics, okay? Right now, a lot of us have our mics on and we can hear things in the background. So if you're not speaking, then just keep your mic off and you can turn it right back on, all right?
Jay, why don't you post the, here we go.
Very simple to mute the mic and on and off while I press your space bar.
All right, so just to kind of get the audience going, we are a butterfly organization in regards to conservation, education, and sometimes even in politics. But what is a butterfly, right? You see things out there and you think it's a butterfly, but it might be a skipper or it might be a moth. Well, what's that? Okay, so here's a simple way to distinguish between the different groups. So I usually do this with students, but we're all lifelong learners. Let's see if you can see my hands. So if you make a fist, that means that you are a butterfly because you have that club-shaped antennae. All right, so butterflies have a club-shaped antennae. There's a little, kind of like a little ball at the end. Skippers have a hook. So it's like this. Yeah, their antennae goes up and then it hooks. And then moths have two different versions. They can have a feathery antennae or it can be straight. So when you see something out there that might look like a butterfly, look at the antennae to determine whether it might be a skipper or even a moth. So let's look at the letter A. Just write this in the chat. Look at the antennae. Do you think it is a butterfly, moth, or skipper? Yes, you didn't know we were going to start off with a quiz. All right. So Tiffany Moore, you are correct. And Maria, it is a moth. Excellent. All right. Let's look at B. Is B a butterfly, moth, or skipper?
Skipper.
You're a panelist. Mary Rose, you're an expert here. All right. So Mary Rose, Maria, and Tiffany, you are correct. B is a skipper. And then finally, what do you think C is? Is C a butterfly, moth, or skipper? All right. So Tiffany, you are 3 for 3. Daniela, you are correct. It is a butterfly. So now you know, next time you go outside and you look at some insect with wings that kind of has this shape, check the antennae first, and that'll help you put it into the group of butterfly, moth, or skipper. All right, I'm going to move on to Dennis. You are up.
All right, thank you, Jay. And welcome everyone to our quarterly membership meeting for the Miami Blue chapter. We've got a number of things going on in this meeting. Most importantly, we have a guest speaker who Jay will introduce in just a few minutes. And I think you'll find it a fascinating presentation. We also have a brief business meeting where we are electing direct officers of our organization. This is an annual episode, and we're going to try to do this. We will have to do it remotely. So Jay has teed up a polling mechanism. For those of you who are members, we encourage you to vote, and we'll get to that after our guest speaker. But just before Jay does his intro, let me introduce Dr. Jeffrey Glassberg, who is the president of the North American Butterfly Association, our parental unit, if you will. NABA is the overarching, as its title indicates, is the national organization. We at Miami Blue are a chapter of that national organization. And I wanted Jeff just to address, in particular, the people that are on this webinar that are not members of NABA and the Miami Blue, but also I want the Miami Blue people to pay attention as well, because membership is something that's important, very important in this effort that we're trying to do in terms of conserving butterflies. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I don't know, does anyone, am I seeable under this? I'm not even sure how this is working. Do people see me? You know? So
we can see you.
Okay, great. And so first thing, if you can see me, I want to apologize for that, and apologize for my COVID hair here, which is scheduled to get cut in a month. So that will be exciting. So Dennis asked me to tell you a little bit. He said I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to go. I've got the 63 slides, not really. We'll have to go through those in a minute. And let's see if I can do the share screen here. And let's see if I can do this. And let's see if I can do this. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. So, so the North American Butterfly Association, the only organization in the world working to save the planet. I'm actually told by my producer that that might be a slight exaggeration, but we are doing, we are working that. So this is really why you should be interested in joining NABA and helping us here. NABA publishes couple of magazines. American Butterflies is one, another is Butterfly Gardener, and sometimes there are useful articles in them, like you can figure out where to go looking for butterflies or how to identify them, that kind of thing. NABA, if NABA didn't exist, the regal fritillaries would be gone from the eastern United States. They were about to be destroyed on the last major site at Fort Indian Town Gap military reservation, and NABA intervened and sued the US Army and won. That was 22 years ago or so. NABA was responsible for getting Miami Blues listed as on an emergency basis by the state of Florida, the first time any organism was listed on an emergency basis by the state of Florida. And we're still very involved in Florida, as you'll see. The NABA Butterfly Count program that we run, the 4th of July counts and other counts, has amassed the largest database of butterfly abundances in the world. These are the locations of counts that are just in Florida. It's increasingly used by scientists to answer all sorts of questions. In fact, there is a paper that will be published. It's been accepted for publication in Science about the decline of butterflies in the Western United States, of which I'm a co-author, and that paper will be out within the next few weeks, and that uses largely data from the NABA butterfly counts. NABA has a program to certify butterfly gardens throughout the United States, and thousands and thousands of people have done that, not only certifying their own garden, but the signs help increase awareness among neighbors and passerbys about the importance of butterfly gardening. NABA runs the National Butterfly Center. We own and operate the National Butterfly Center in extreme southern Florida on the Mexican border. It's been in the news a lot in the last year, if you are the sort to follow that kind of thing. This is one of the paths down to the Butterfly Center. These are some of the butterflies you can see at the Butterfly Center, so I urge you to go. We focus on not only conserving butterflies, but being an educational resource. There are thousands and thousands of kids from what is the poorest area of the United States. The 3 counties where the Butterfly Center is located have the lowest per capita income of any counties in the United States. Here are some of the kids. They're awfully cute. 6,000 of them come through the Butterfly Center each year, and we hope and we know that some of them make a lifelong connection with butterflies. NABA is working directly to conserve butterflies by looking to acquire land. And here are the areas that we are especially working, interested in acquiring land in these circled green areas. Go through very quickly. Some we're about to take ownership of 350 acres of land about 6 miles west of the Butterfly Center, which is supposed to close on February 19th in a few weeks. It's valued at $10 million, and we have big plans for it. Further west in Texas, we're looking to acquire land to help save Coahia giant skippers, one of which is shown here in its habitat. It's pretty dramatic, and we're working on that one. In Southern California, Hermes copper this is the only place in the world it's found. It's not closely related to anything, unlike half the things, 3/4 of the things called endangered species that are really weakly differentiated subspecies of other things. This butterfly is truly unique, and we're very interested in it. In the northern plains, there's actually a bunch of prairie skippers that are about to go extinct. This is the worst in terms of about to go to extinct, power chic skipperling, but we are very interested in trying to acquire prairie land in the upper Midwest to try to save these things. And of course, we're very interested in South Florida, where pine rockland is one of the most endangered communities in the United States. Here are some of the butterflies, endangered butterflies found in pine rocklands. And we are actively working to acquire land and take other steps to try to save these butterflies in extreme southern Florida. So in conclusion, I'd urge all of you who aren't already NABA members to join NABA so that you can have fun, meet other people, stay healthy. It's great exercise. And oh yeah, you'll be saving the planet at the same time. So that's my spiel, and welcome to the webinar.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. That was very, very nice and very impressive. And as everyone can see, NABA has a very, very long reach. And for a relatively small organization compared to other conservation organizations, we feel like we're, as they say, punch above our weight class. So I too will encourage everyone, those who aren't members, to please join, and those who are members to redouble your effort to make sure that Miami Blue Chapter and the North American Butterfly Association both are successful in these really major efforts that are being done. That said, Jason, I'll turn it back to you to introduce our guest speaker.
All right. Okay, so I am going to introduce, one second. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our guest speaker today. I actually first met him at the Entomological Society of America annual conference, which is the largest organization that combines research scientists, education scientists, policymakers in the United States. So it's definitely a great place to learn about what's going on in the insect community, find jobs, and even change policies that can affect you and I in regards to like crops and stuff like that. So Dr. Wepprich, I apologize, is a research associate at Oregon State University. However, he earned his PhD at North Carolina State University in Dr. Haddart's lab. And if you know who Dr. Haddart is, he's worked with a lot of rare butterflies and skippers in North Carolina, but in other parts of the world. He has a lot of graduate students who do that work too. And so one of the things that I want to highlight about Dr. Wepprich is that he has this really good paper that I uncovered in +1 that talks about butterfly abundance declines over 20 years of systematic monitoring in Ohio, USA. This is a really powerful study, which he will probably talk about in his presentation, which should be applied to like what's going on with butterflies all throughout the US. So he's kind of like set a model for how we can actually observe long-term trends with butterflies in one state, which can be used for other states. And he was featured in a podcast known as Pollination. And so if you go to Pollination Podcast, episode 105, you can hear his interview regarding the insect apocalypse. So I'd like to thank you for coming in, and I'm going to stop sharing so that you can share your screen.
All right, thank you, Jay. Yeah, that was a fun meeting in St. Louis, which is my hometown for the Entomological Society meeting. So thank you, Jay, for inviting me, and thank you to the Miami Blue chapter of NABA for hosting me. This is going to be fun. I really love talking about butterfly monitoring and what we can learn from it. And I also have a new job. I'm still going to be thinking a lot about insects in my free time, but I work for the Oregon Department of Forestry now as of this summer. And right now, my job is consumed with thinking about how to restore forests after fire. You may have heard of our big fires over Labor Day last year. So it's a new challenge. I got to learn a lot about fire restoration from my work with Nick Haddad and Erica Henry with rare butterflies at Fort Bragg Military Base in North Carolina. And so I'm bringing my knowledge of good fire to restore habitat from the East Coast out here to where people are a little less receptive to anything that threatens timber value. So it's definitely going to be a political and scientific challenge in this new job. And I'll share this slideshow with Jay so he can distribute it because there are a few links to papers and things like that. And it has my email address on it if you'd like to contact me later. And I also apologize in advance if it gets noisy in the background. I'm at home and I have a 5-month-old baby. So he's being chill right now, but you may hear him in the background at some point. So to start off, one thing I'd like to do to get an idea of what you all have heard about insect declines. My title is sort of tongue-in-cheek. Insect declines make headlines because I see a lot about them in the news, but the studies that they're based on might have different levels of, I guess, trustworthiness behind them. So one thing since we're all at our computers, I am curious if you can find on the internet through search right now an outrageous title about all insects going extinct or declining. And so we can just take like 20 seconds, use your search kung fu to put into the chat an insect decline headline that you find. Thanks, Sundaram, and I'll get to your questions later on. Okay, I see plummeting insect numbers threaten the collapse of nature. Death by 1,000 cuts, that's one of the most recent ones that I'll talk about. Bugged. Where have all the insects gone? I recognize that. We need to talk about the rapid decline of insects around the world. And catastrophic insect extinction could threaten humanity. Pollinator apocalypse. All right, I'm gonna stop there. Thank you all for humoring me. I wanted to set the stage of just what we're hearing in the news and how the interest in insects came about, because it's sort of a new thing to have so much popular attention directed to insects. So people have been looking at insect declines for a few years already. So this is an example of one of my favorite papers that was written before the hype. And this group of scientists looked at animals across the world, not just insects. And for those with data, they tried to summarize like how the trends were. And they found over about 40 years with butterflies, about a 1% per year annual decline, with this 35% total if you accumulate that 1% year after year. And they found that butterfly diversity, or the number of species, was lower when there was more disturbance. So this is sort of my baseline of what's happening with animals in the world. And you can see that with non-Lepidoptera, with insects that aren't butterflies and moths, they were doing worse, but there's so much worse data out there compared to butterflies because of so many enthusiastic observers of butterflies, like at NABA. So the hype of insect decline sort of, I place it starting in the fall of 2017, when German researchers published a paper that just had an enormous number in the title. So 75% decline over 27 years using the traps that you see here in the picture. Insects would fly onto the net and go into jars of alcohol, and they would put the jars of alcohol in a closet somewhere at a research station in Germany, and didn't really start looking at them until more recently, when they found that there were fewer insects in the jars. And so this started more hype about insect declines. And then based on some long-term data in Puerto Rico, these scientists resampled some places in Puerto Rico, just taking a sweep net and weighing how much biomass there was in insects in the rainforest in Puerto Rico. And they had a very popular paper, and you can just see the bar graph comparing the left side to the right side, a lot fewer insects when they went to recollect them. This paper has come under some criticism, which I won't go into, but when you only sample at 2 points in time, it's really tough to know if it's a real decline or if it's just the insect was having a good year or a bad year that time. Insects are tough in that way. So after these papers came out, the New York Times Magazine had a wonderful article about some of these papers and sort of popularized the term apocalypse. And I really like Brooke Jarvis as a writer, and I think this was a great article, a tearjerker, but one that was really important. And so then I think someone may have highlighted this title in their Google search. These scientists came out with what they called a worldwide review of insect declines. And when it was written up in The Guardian and picked up by other news sources, it said insects could vanish within a century, which is definitely an exaggeration. And after this one got picked up by a lot of news stories, people started criticizing its methods, and there was pushback. Starting with an Australian researcher, Manu Sanders, and Ed Young, before he was writing about the pandemic, he could write about other things. And so he wrote in The Atlantic about whether the insect apocalypse was really here. Other scientists started writing about it and criticizing it more. So there was sort of this debate of how good are these different research studies and how concerned should we be about insect declines in general? You know, there's a lot of anecdotes about insects, like not seeing as many fireflies in the eastern US, or not having to clean your windshields off on road trips as frequently because there's less splatter. But the small way I could contribute was using the data that I analyzed during my PhD at NC State. So thanks to countless volunteers in Ohio, the Ohio lepidopterists have been monitoring butterflies at these sites across the state, with some of the sites being monitored since 1996. And what they do is these volunteers will go out every week, and imagine they're in a 5-meter box like this illustration, and they count every butterfly along their transect that's within that box. And they do that every week from April to October. They count every butterfly they see in that box, and they've been accumulating that data for 20 years. And this group really saved my PhD, because I was working with Nick on rare butterflies at Fort Bragg. And I just discovered I wasn't as good of a field biologist as I was a statistician. So I had to switch projects a lot during my PhD, and eventually settled on analyzing some of the Ohio data. I also got to go on some NABA counts with the Ohio volunteers. So they do pollard walks, these transects, but a lot of them are also involved in NABA and do the 4th of July counts together. So with this big data set, I could ask about butterflies in Ohio, whether they are trending up or trending down. Is it all species that are trending down, or some doing better than others? So these were my main questions. The second one, so life history traits refer to just all the different things that different kinds of butterflies do to make a living. So whether they overwinter as eggs or in a cocoon or as an adult, or if they eat one kind of plant or another kind of plant, or how many generations they try to do each summer. So those are all things that are different about species that could explain why some might do better or worse. And I also wanted to look at Ohio's trends compared to European monitoring, where they've been going on for almost 50 years now. So there was a lot of statistics. This is my one modeling slide. It took a lot of work, a lot of staring at a computer to figure out how to model 80 butterfly species trends and try to account for the volunteers' experience and the amount of time they spent on each transect, to try to standardize how many butterflies they were counting based on those facts that they collect, including weather, because you might see more butterflies when the weather is better. So after all that modeling, which I won't bore you with, this was the main answer that I came up with. So when you think about all the butterflies in Ohio, all 80 species they were counting, when you add their total together, on average, volunteers are counting 1/3 fewer butterflies per minute compared to what they were doing 20 years ago. On an annual basis, that amounts to about a 2% per year rate of decline. And on this graph, the gray line is that trend. The black dots are the variation from year to year. So you can have some really good years, like 2010 was a great year for butterflies in Ohio. And that little gray shading around the line is the error in the estimation. So you can imagine that line could be anywhere within that little shaded area. And that's, where the trend could be. And so 2% per year is a pretty small number, compared to some of those other papers talking about 75% decline. But I think what impressed me throughout this work was just like a pretty small decline each year over a couple of decades can lead to a really big difference. And it's something that you wouldn't notice year to year as your baseline for what's normal shifts. You may not think that butterflies are becoming less common, but when you look at the data over a long amount of time, it's really valuable to see what the changes actually are. And now as far as which species were doing better or worse, there were 80 species, and about half of them, you couldn't tell from the data if they were increasing or decreasing, or if they were stable. The ones that were doing worse tended to only have one generation, that's univoltine, one generation per year. And they also tended to be northern species. So they were species that are distributed kind of in the upper Midwest, and maybe that southern edge of their range in Ohio was where conditions were becoming worse for them. The species that were doing better tended to have multiple generations per year. So if the season's longer and it's warmer, they might be able to fit in an extra generation. And they tended to be from the South. Some of them were moving into Ohio over these 2 decades and becoming more common. And they also tended to eat shrubs and grasses and sedges as food. And some of these other traits that I have in the middle column didn't seem to have an effect on whether the species was doing better or worse. And so I'll just go through a few popular common species. So the monarch in Ohio, during the summer counts, was declining, but you'll notice that when you look at the annual variation, you can see that those first 2 years had really high numbers. And this was following 2 years of really high overwinter counts in Mexico. And so, I don't know whether you should include those or not. When you take them out, the trend is a little lower. And in Ohio, I think, as well as with the overwintering sites, the last few years have been a little bit better for monarchs. And so I think in Ohio, they're probably stable or only declining a tiny bit over the summer. Unfortunately, I only have data through 2016 for Ohio. Okay, so now the most common butterfly in the world is the cabbage white. It was introduced to North America from Europe in the 1800s. And I was pretty surprised that it was also declining, because this is a butterfly that we think is really able to exploit human habitat and is sort of a pest. This is the main butterfly I see in my backyard in Oregon. So it's kind of surprising to see cabbage whites declining. Here's kind of a drab butterfly. This is a skipper, and it has tripled in abundance in Ohio over the 20 years. And the reason is it adapted to eat a different plant for food. So it used to eat wild indigo. It still does, but humans had planted a different plant that was very similar to wild indigo along roadsides in Ohio. And this butterfly was able to take advantage of that and has increased once its host plant became really abundant. And the gem satyr is an example of a southern species that wasn't seen in Ohio at the beginning of the monitoring, but has started to, as it's conditions, as conditions are getting warmer in Ohio, the southern species is having its population slowly do better and becoming more common in southern Ohio. So compared to Europe, I looked at 3 long-term monitoring programs in Europe. The UK is the longest one with so many sites. I mean, this is just incredible. They count almost 2 million butterflies a year. Ohio for pollard walks is maybe the 4th most extensive in the world. It's a different kind of monitoring than the NABA counts. So when you look at European species, I think what was striking to me was that all of them, when you standardize them to have this annual trend, they were all about 2% decline in the total abundance of species. And most had more species with negative declines than positive, as you can see on the right, with a fair amount that were stable or didn't have the data to say one way or another. So I thought it was really interesting that these 4 monitoring programs were all pretty similar in that trend. What they have in common is they're all dominated by human land use, and they're all in the temperate climate. So even though we have a great idea of how butterflies are trending in this climate and in this type of land use, there's still not much known on butterflies in tropical or subtropical like Florida, or places that are a little more protected. So in Ohio, one reason they might be in decline is habitat loss. Ohio's population has actually been shrinking since 50 years ago, but there still is a lot of fragmentation and human use. So the left side of this Ohio map, the brown is corn and soybean farms. On the right, we have green for forests, and then the pink and red are urban areas and suburban areas. And the blue dots are where the sites are. They're mostly in suburban areas where people live. And so there could be some habitat loss and fragmentation of habitat that is causing some butterflies to decline. As far as climate change in Ohio, climate change is occurring at different rates in different parts of the world. Ohio is about 1 degree warmer now than it was in the 80s. And that could be causing some butterflies to be able to fit in an extra generation in the summer as the summer gets longer. So it could be good for those butterflies, but be bad for those northern butterflies that seem to be doing worse. And another possible concern is pesticides. And I'm not an expert on pesticides, but what I have here is on the left, the trend in Ohio of use of glyphosate or Roundup. And on the right are 3 different kinds of neonicotinoid pesticides, which have been banned in Europe because they are insecticides that target pest insects as well as beneficial insects. So, there's not a smoking gun in the Ohio trends when you look at like which sites are near farmland and all those soybeans and corn. It's just not clear to me from the data how pesticides are affecting the statewide Ohio trends. So it's a potential source of a problem, but I can't give more information than that. Other people are looking into this, and I think what they find is that even though these pesticides may be harmful to insect populations, they, compared to pesticides from a few decades ago that these newer ones are replacing, it's unclear which one is better or worse. Let's see. I saw a hand raised, but I'm having trouble seeing it. I don't know if you want to ask the question right now.
I'm looking. I think Dr. Glassberg had a question, or his hand. Did you raise your hand, Dr. Glassberg?
No, I did not.
Okay, well, I'll keep going and we'll have time for questions. So those are just 3 possible, I think the main contributors in Ohio. I don't know much about some of the other issues. Artificial light is a big one of concern. Insects will use the day length outside, the natural day length, to know when to prepare for winter. And so, artificial light can mimic that, and insects may not know when the right time is to start getting ready for the colder season. And then Sundaram, I wasn't sure about the volatile organic compounds or the electric and magnetic fields. I know that some people have been looking into that, but I can't speak to how important those might be. So in summary, in temperate regions with heavily modified landscapes, the best monitored group of insects we have, the butterflies, is declining at 2% per year. More show decreases than increases, but there are winners. There are species that are adapting to changes and becoming more abundant. And then for other insect groups and for rarer butterflies and in the warmer parts of the earth where butterflies are more diverse, we don't have as much data as we'd like to know how they're doing. And here's a link to the paper, and I'll send the slides around so that you have that link. Or you can also Google my name and +1. So let's see here. What's our time looking like, Jay? I can answer some questions now.
You have maybe 20 minutes or so. You have plenty of time.
Yeah.
Do you want to start? Okay, so.
Well, so yeah, if there are questions on Ohio, I can talk about them now. And then I've got more stuff to talk about.
Okay, so I know. Okay, so we have. Thanks. Do you know who is studying VOC's EMF effects? I can't find anyone doing and have been asking.
Okay, you've been asking the big names. Yeah, if they don't know, then I'm not sure.
Okay, what are VOCs and EMS?
So VOCs would be volatile organic compounds. That's a type of pollution. It's something that I think you said that plants and insects communicate with them. It could be disrupting some of those modes of communication or finding how insects find host plants. If it's mimicking a natural compound. And then EMF, electric and magnetic fields, I'm not an expert by any means, but it's another thing where you can think about what could be disrupting insect communication, and is that influencing populations? Yeah, in general, scientists are focusing on kind of the big three I mentioned: habitat loss and change, climate change, and pesticides for their effects on insects. But there are other things like this that definitely need more people to look into. So I'm sorry I can't help you with exactly who is doing that. Let's see.
Tyson, this is Dennis Ollie. Tyson?
Yeah.
This is Dennis Ollie. Could you put the slide back up that showed the various metrics and the ones you thought were of no effect, of little effect, and it was sort of there was one item that surprised me.
Yeah, so this was the species traits from the 80 different species and which ones were associated with doing better or worse.
I'm a little surprised by the last one under little effect, disturbance exploiter. But I mean, the data is what it is. I would have thought that would be a very positive, the more disturbed. If someone's a disturbance exploiter, they should be prospering in Ohio.
Right.
Thoughts about that?
Yeah, and so that's kind of with the cabbage white too. I was really confused at why it was declining, because you'd think that a disturbance exploiter that is found in backyards would be doing pretty well with that if they can live in that habitat. My gut feeling is that they probably increased a lot as land use changed in Ohio. And then, land use in Ohio hasn't changed that much since the 70s and 80s. So my inclination is that their boom with human modified habitat maybe had already happened, and now they're sort of stable. Yeah, so I'm not sure. That's my speculation.
Yeah,
On a,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to say, I mean, I think, I mean, I have no data about this either relevant, except to say that there's only really two really non-native introduced butterflies in North America, well, outside of Hawaii, cabbage whites and European skippers. And European skippers numbers are way down in the Northeast anyway, even though they're still expanding range in in parts of the West. And so, it may very well be that even that various parasites and things that didn't initially affect these species now have, I mean, this is just complete speculation, Tyson, but because their numbers are significantly down also. And it just may be that, eventually the natural forces in the continent catch up with the invasive species.
Yeah, that's
And one more sort of follow-up of your slide with the chemicals on it. And this goes to sort of the segue about backyards. Something that's going on in my neighborhood and throughout South Florida is spraying yards for insect control. And the irony is they plant these little signs. You know what's happening because they don't want humans and dogs in the grass, your yard, after they've sprayed it for insects. And we have one local company that they are eliminating bugs, but their mascot is a monarch butterfly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And around, I have probably half of my neighborhood is sprayed routinely. And I don't even know what they're spraying, but it I assume eliminates almost all the insects completely. It's obviously not discriminatory in terms of roaches and mosquitoes, which is what, bug people, pardon the pun. Do you know what is being used? And is maybe that also is something that's happening, is that the disturbed habitat, my backyard, although obviously they're not spraying it, but both sides of my yard, both neighbors and the back neighbor all spray.
Yeah, I don't know exactly which insecticide they're using in that case. But yeah, when I lived in North Carolina, there were a lot of those, signs up in people's yards for mosquito spraying. Yeah, that could definitely be one reason. I mean, yeah, for cabbage whites and a lot of disturbance exploiting species to be in decline, it means that something is becoming less hospitable in those human-dominated habitats like backyards. So I wouldn't be surprised if that has a big impact in cities.
All right, so I have two questions. First question is, to somebody who doesn't really know a lot about butterflies or cares, why does this matter? Who cares? I mean, I know why it matters, but can you tell us why does understanding trends and then seeing a downward trend, why would that be problematic?
Yeah, so I kind of have two answers. The first one is sort of more, what can they do for us? Since butterflies are like the best monitored insect, I think you can make an argument that studying what butterflies are doing is probably telling us a lot about other insects, which we may not have good data on at all. So if you're thinking about native bees that are pollinating certain crops that we need to eat, if they're also in decline, that means food is going to get more expensive for us. Or if dung beetles or carrion beetles are also in decline, roadkill is going to start piling up on the side of the roads because insects aren't eating it anymore. I mean, that's kind of a silly example, but insects do a lot of things for us that we don't think about on a day-to-day basis. And so if what's happening with butterflies is true for other insects, we should be worried for us. And then my less utilitarian example is the St. Francis satyr that Nick Haddad and Erica Henry and I worked on at Fort Bragg. This is a subspecies of an endangered butterfly that's found only on one military base in North Carolina. It's not doing anything for us. It's not really doing much for the ecosystem around it. I just think it's wrong to just like let it go extinct. And so that's my opinion. I think it's a beautiful butterfly. I think even if it weren't beautiful, I don't know, it's not on us to decide like that it should just stop existing. So I think that's probably my main reason for being worried. Even if it's not impacting me personally in what it does as it goes about its life.
All right. And so then the second question is, this is from the audience. Is there, and I can probably help you out with this. By the way, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, so I spent all my time there until I moved to Florida. And so they're asking, is there a simple reason for the dramatic increase in glyphosate in Ohio? Increased farming seems unlikely. Have farmers switched from some other herbicide to glyphosate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So glyphosate is an herbicide, so it kills weeds. So often when you see those butterfly labels on food that says non-GMO, that's a result of farmers' use of genetically modified crops like corn and soybeans. So those genetically modified crops are tolerant of Roundup or glyphosate. So this increase in glyphosate just means farmers started adopting more genetically modified corn and soybeans as it became available and got cheaper. Once they planted those GMO corn and soybeans, they're able to use glyphosate on the entire field. It kills all the weeds that are not genetically modified until they evolve resistance. And the hope is that they don't have to use as many other herbicides to take the place of glyphosate. So it's the increase of GMO corn and soybeans in Ohio that's causing the increase of glyphosate usage. And you can see it's kind of plateaued more recently, because use of those kinds of seeds is close to 100% in Ohio. So good question, thanks. All right, so one thing I wanted to talk about is how we frame insect apocalypse. Is 2% change a year? Should we even be saying apocalypse, or is that too alarmist? And this is something I think about a lot because as a scientist, you want people to pay attention to your research. You want to be accurate so people aren't misled. But a lot of times, once you publish something, you lose control of the story and people can say what they want. So one example with birds that came out recently, I thought was really interesting because as it was being publicized, they were looking at continent-wide bird trends in North America. And the number that was always highlighted in news articles was that 3 billion birds were lost, which sounds like an enormous number. But when I looked more into the actual study, 3 billion birds was about 29% of a decline. And they were actually declining much slower than the butterflies in Ohio. So I just thought it was funny that, if you want something to get read, you choose the 3 billion number rather than the 0.8% per year. So that's just something to think about as you are reading stories about animal declines. And then we talked about this a little bit, but in the birds study and in my butterfly study, a lot of the decline was due to non-native species that were really abundant and ones that we may not even want that were declining. So for birds, it was house sparrows and European starlings. And in Ohio, it was cabbage white and European skippers, which were both in decline. And so I think, even invasive species, their caterpillars can be important for bird food. They can have a big impact on the food web and the environment. But I think it's still an open question if we should really care about the conservation of really common species like that. And then another question that, scientists are asking themselves is like, is there a positive feedback loop where as the media gives more attention to declines, are more people looking for declines, and are studies about positive effects, not being published as often? So I think the interest in insects is really great. It seems very new, but yeah, it's definitely a concern of mine of, am I framing my research as an apocalypse rather than looking at the data and assessing the trends in a very unbiased way. So it's constantly a challenge, as a scientist and as a person who cares about insects. And I think one other thing that's really interesting with Ohio is, my lab at NC State that I worked in and some of the conservation that NABA is doing focus on the rarest butterflies, where we can have a big impact if we get their host plants planted, if we introduce disturbance on the landscape, like in the case of the Fort Bragg butterflies, to help their habitat. We can have a big impact on the population of those rare butterflies, and that's generally where conservation has been focused, is on those species that we worry about extinction. And I think thinking about the insect declines more broadly to include common species is one direction that I am really happy about for where the insect apocalypse hype is leading us, is to think about insects as providing a service when they're abundant, when they're everywhere, and when even the common species can play a role in conservation. So that's my opinion about how conservation might change for insects with this hype. And then just as an example for how it's sort of like telephone, a game of telephone as you publish your research. So I worked with a university press officer to write a press release to go with the PLOS One study. And this was the title. So decades-long butterfly study shows common species on the decline. It leaves something out because some species were increasing. But in general, this is, I think, an accurate summary of the study. So I was lucky to talk to a bunch of journalists. It got some attention. So here it's talking about bees, which I didn't really talk about, but maybe I mentioned it in the interview, which was my fault. Butterflies are disappearing, and not kind of an exaggeration. Butterflies are in peril. That seems okay. Plummet by a third sort of implies a cliff, not a gradual decline. This one's pretty accurate from the New Scientist. Butterfly die-off linked to climate change sounds like they're just roasting alive, which isn't true. And then this title was in all caps when it was published on Newsweek, Butterfly Death. So after I talked to reporters, they would write a story. They often don't choose what the title that runs is. So it was out of my hands, and I was happy that it was being written about at all. And then updates. So since the Ohio study came out, I think we've had more attention. In Science, Roel van Klink and some German co-authors, as well as the Swangels, published a really great article trying to summarize insect declines with every study we know that's available around the globe. And what they found was that terrestrial insects generally are declining at 1% a year, so slightly better than Ohio. And aquatic insects were actually increasing slightly. So I think that's the best benchmark so far for like a global trend, although it still is very limited because we don't have studies from the tropics in the same abundance that we have from Europe and North America. And recently, the PNAS article, this is the one that has the Death by 1,000 Cuts article written by David Wagner and Eliza Grames and others. This issue is completely open access, so you can read all the different articles, and it comes from a symposium that was at the same entomological society meeting that Jay and I were at in St. Louis. So it has some really famous names writing articles summarizing what they're thinking about with the global insect decline. And a couple things that are going on. So with pollard walk-based monitoring, Leslie Reese is trying to bring all these different states together so we can summarize what's happening in North America more broadly. And I really like the project that Eliza Graham's, a grad student at UConn, is doing, where she is having a group of people try to really look through everything that's been published in English and other languages to try to find hidden studies of insect trends, to really bring together everything that we know about insects and try to analyze it and get a better picture of what's happening. The other thing I'm excited about, this is really challenging, but this is the direction that insect monitoring is going. So we have monitoring in Ohio, like from the 20 years of pollard walks, and that's in this top row where I'm showing the number of butterflies counted per year. But what happened, before 1995? So the best way to get a handle of that is going back to museums and private insect collections and digitizing them and looking at what happened over the last 50 to 100 years to see if changes were already happening or if they're recent. That's really difficult because it's not as standardized as monitoring like the pollard walks or the 4th of July counts. And then we also have the brand new community science apps like iNaturalist, which I use and love to learn my bees. Growth of iNaturalist is growing exponentially. And we're going to have to try to use all 3 of these insect monitoring protocols to combine them and try to see how longer term trends are going. And the right side of the screen is just where these different data are collected in Ohio. Let's see. And then from that PNAS article, I really like Akito Kawahara, who's a professor at UF. He has an article that he leads with things that you can do for insects on a personal level. And, a lot of these are just fun. So talking about insects to people is one of them. And converting lawns into more diverse habitat. It may not help if your neighbor is mosquito spraying, but maybe they'll start seeing your garden of flowers and ask you how they can do it too. So Lawn to Wildflowers is a new program based at University of Central Florida by several folks there, and it's an app. It's a program where they help you find seeds for native plants. And so I was inspired by them to do this to my lawn in Oregon. And so after a year, it went from dirt to a bunch of great flowers, and I mainly got cabbage whites on them. So it was still okay. I got a lot of new bees that I'd never seen before. And this is what it looked like year 2. So with that, I'll pause for questions. And if we have time, I have a lot of shorter stories that you can choose from. I had a list of short things that we could talk
about. Okay, so it's not necessarily a question, but a couple of people are using iNaturalist, so they appreciate that it's a great app or a useful app. And I guess in regards to VOCs and EMF effects, this was more focused on the global insect population. So it was written, Thomas wrote about the fact that these non-native species often act in a niche that has been reduced because the native species are gone. So other than that, I just wanted to direct everybody to, if you visit the website, miamiblue.org, that if you go to the website, they will show you which plants you can plant in South Florida that attract butterflies that live in South Florida, and then also the nurseries where to get them. So as mentioned earlier, you can go to Home Depot and Lowe's, for example. However, the best places to find these butterfly attracting plants are usually going to be found at native plant nurseries. So it's there. You just have to do a little bit of internet searching and you're good to go. All right.
Yeah, I see some questions too from Suzanne. Okay. I wasn't careful about caterpillar host plants. You know, I have lupines and I was hoping I would get some blue butterflies, but most of them are just nectar plants. So that's a great question. And if you want butterflies, you might need to spend some extra time getting their host plants, not just get flowers that, you know, European honeybees like. So yeah, I was just hoping for flowers and I wasn't thinking about host plants very well. And I also want to say that, you know, there are a lot of other platforms that you can use for butterflies in addition to iNaturalist. iNaturalist is kind of a catch-all, but there are other ones that, you know, NABA has Me Butterfly, I think, and there's eButterfly. There are other examples that are more targeted towards butterflies and moths that you might find a little easier to use. But for me, iNaturalist is pretty simple because I'm doing a lot of things other than butterflies.
Well,
yeah, so what's our time like, Jay?
So we actually need to get into the officers portion. So I just want to say thank you for helping to clarify the apocalypse. You know, this is definitely needed because there's all those headlines and stuff. Don't forget to check that. Don't forget that.
I would throw in one thing there. You know, I very much like your approach, Tyson, to everything, and I would throw in there in the same category as what you're saying in terms of these things is all of this stuff about monarchs are going extinct, you know, and everybody swears that it's because of Roundup and all of this stuff. There's very little evidence that monarchs are declining, but they're not going extinct, that's for sure. And the evidence that most of the decline is from fewer milkweeds is extremely tenuous. You know, people, that's it. The problem, and the same thing with this, the vast majority of people have problems with any nuance at all. It's either black and white. Either things are great or my God, it's all, you know, it's a apocalypse. So that's part of the problem, and that's these headlines. And once someone says anything, you know, once these people say, oh, monarchs are going to say everybody's on it, and that's what they, or once one lab publishes some speculative thing based on almost no good evidence that, you know, tropical milkweeds are killing off the monarchs, oh, everybody says, oh, this must be true, and it just gets passed to everybody, and it's nonsense. You know, it's a problem in this world to keep truth somewhat level here. But anyway, I thought you did a great job.
All right, yeah, thanks y'all for having me, and thanks for the great questions. I'll send the slides to Jay so he can share it. And my email is pretty simple. It's just my first name dot my last name @gmail if you want to follow up. So thanks.
Oh, thank you. All right, so we're gonna go now to
Okay, this is Dennis. There we've got our agenda back up, and thanks again, Tyson. We really appreciate your time and efforts, and thanks for sharing the slides. There's some good ideas that we can put on our website, especially that last slide regarding just little things that can be done in your yard and in your neighborhood for supporting insect populations. So election of officers, Jay, do you have what we're going to try to do, folks, is do a poll that consists of at least 2 iterations. One is there is a list of officers that is being proposed, and we would like, first of all, your support, or we would offer it, to just elect the slate. If a majority of you support that we can proceed to elect a slate, we will then have a second vote to do so. So the first question is, do we want to go through each person and vote for each office, or just simply elect the slate? And the idea will be, if we vote yes, that we'll do it the slate, thumbs up or thumbs down, then we'll go to a second question. Obviously, if the consensus is that we want to vote for each item, then so be it. We'll go through each person and vote up and down. So I guess the first question is posed by Jay, and that you should see on your screen is, do you support the slate of officers, this slate of officers for 2021? You'll note that I will tell you this is essentially a re-election of all the existing officers in these positions. So there's really no change, although I will certainly welcome any comment or question about this at this time. And I guess you can type in either a chat or a question in this regard. But if Jay, tell me, unless there is some, we'll proceed to vote. And I assume the point is
they are voting right now.
All right.
So far, we have 11 of 24, 12 of 24. We need, we're at 50%. So let's try to get at least up to like 90%.
Yeah. I see that the host and the panelists cannot vote. So at least that's the indication on my screen. So you'll have a few of us who are disenfranchised.
Yeah, the poll is only displaying for the attendees. So we'll have to do a separate vote.
So I'm going to bow out, let you do your chapter business, guys, and thank you for inviting me. And it was very, very informative and useful. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Okay.
I think it's fair to say that the panelists are probably going to support the slate, since they are on it. So I think we can conclude that Jay, can we assume that based on the vote you've received, and that the fact that the people that are listed here who can't vote are in support of this? Yeah, and we realize that only Miami Blue members should be voting. All right, well, I see no one is objecting. So Jay, should we go to the, do we need to go to another vote, or is this enough? Do you have a second screen or not?
So I have another poll, and that poll is for individuals.
Okay, then we don't need to do that. So we've got 100%. So I see no one voting against the slate, and so we will consider the slate as proposed and seen on your screen as elected for the year 2021. Hearing no objection. Okay, Jay, thank you. And I guess I'll move into just quickly a quick conservation report. If people can stay with us for a few more minutes. One is there are at least 3 items going on conservation that I just want to make you aware of. One is a continuing effort with regard to the Richmond Pineland. That is the pineland that's associated with Zoo Miami and various properties owned by the Miami-Dade County, Martinez Tract, as well as properties owned by the University of Miami. And most recently, I'll say unfortunately, the development that's occurred for the project known as the Coral Reef Commons. You may recall that we've been active in that situation, and most recently with regard to the Florida bonneted bat, which we approach as sort of a umbrella species, protect the bat, you protect the pinelands. That continues to be an effort where we are attempting to get protection for the bat and critical habitat designation in that area. It is at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service now for consideration of comments on the scope of the designation of critical habitat. On a somewhat related matter, the Dade County is also pushing to create a water park right outside of Metro Zoo, and that will be called Miami Wilds. The county is in the process of negotiating and signing a lease with a developer for 2 disconnected sites, both on Richmond Pineland, one a defunct parking lot to the northeast of the Metro Zoo, and also a second parcel up in colloquially known as the Coast Guard housing facility, which is just as you enter the Park Road, the road to the zoo on the left-hand side. Both of those sites are being considered. The initial site is the one down proximate to the zoo, where the water park would be put. The second site, the so-called Coast Guard housing site, would be where they are going to put a deluxe spa. So anyway, these fights, we're not the only group. Several conservation groups are involved, including Tropical Audubon and Bat Conservation International, trying to rein in the efforts in the county in terms of disturbing the land, some of which is already lost. By that I mean it's no longer Pine Rockland, but the cumulative effect of putting a theme park and also a spa in these places cannot be good for.
Dennis, are you able to see the screen? They have you can see it here?
Perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we can see if you go down to the lower, the sort of shape, the southern portion is what is currently proposed. Actually, they do show it as a, where it says proposed theme park. It's the footprint is smaller than that. There's a little sort of area that's not the green rectangle. That's critical. The green rectangle where the arrow is pointing is critical habitat for the Bartram scrub hairstreak and the Florida leafwing, as is all the other green. So you can sort of see this crazy shaped. All of this is previously designated critical habitat for two butterflies, the leafwing and the hairstreak. But that sort of irregular rectangle that says proposed theme park, it's smaller now. The footprint is significantly smaller. It's now essentially to the west of that embedded rectangle. So to the west of where the arrow is pointing in the south, that little area where it's the pro and proposed in theme is sort of the area that is proposed to be the spa. And then on down, I don't think there's any corridor connecting them, but on down and sort of to the left side, the west side of that oblong shaped thing is where they intend to put the water park. So the lease that is being proposed, that lease is being created. It is, the county has approved it, but it has not yet been signed. There are issues with regard to title, and there are also some issues regarding whether there continue to be some conservation easements on one or more of these two sites. Without getting too much in the weeds, the economics of this project make no sense whatsoever. And that was in 2018, pre-COVID, post or in the middle of COVID and the after effects of COVID on the hospitality community, and especially in startup hospitality, which this would be. Venture to say this is meant to fail. And as taxpayers, forget being conservationists, as taxpayers, we should all be outraged. It's a waste of our money. So anyway, we're following this closely. Anyone that wants to participate, it's something I spend something on every week working on this project, along with some other folks, again, at Tropical Audubon and Bat Conservation International. So it's an area that's important to us because obviously putting in water parks and lights and all of that is going to have adverse impact, not just on the bats, but it can't be good for habitat protection for these butterflies. Two other issues. One, they both relate to Everglades National Park. I continue to have, along with Joe Barrows, the president of Tropical Audubon, a letter writing contest with the superintendent of Everglades National Park regarding roadkill along the main park road. We were talking earlier in the officers meeting, if you haven't been to Flamingo recently, a significant portion of the road has been repaved, and now people who want to get to Flamingo can get there at high rate of speed. it's resulting in, or will undoubtedly result in, more roadkill than already has taken place. That's a letter writing that goes back and forth. And Becky, I owe you the most recent letter that went out on Friday to post on the website. The park is playing the old rope-a-dope. We don't have any data. I supplied them with 7 different papers of data of roadkill, either generic or a couple of them specific to Everglades National Park, and one specific to what is called the Paheoki wetlands, from Paheoki turnoff down to Mahogany Hammock turnoff, written 30 years ago about mortality of snakes. The point is that speeding is going on. It has always gone on, and now it's going to go faster with the improved road. That segues into something that has just occurred in Thursday and Friday. The park is soliciting comments on the improvement of the road, the access road to Shark Valley, and the expansion of the parking lot. This is the slide that's posted, shows what the park is concerned about. You get traffic that backs up. You'll see this is traffic coming off of Tamiami Trail going south to the toll gate for Shark Valley, and you'll see it's all backed up. And most of us, if you've been there, know that during the season, the dry season, better weather, the parking lot gets full and people park out on Tamiami Trail, and they're all concerned about that. So there is a comment period. There are 2 workshops that are being conducted next week. They'll be put on our website. One is on Tuesday and one is on Wednesday. Tuesday is from 1 to 2 p.m. and Wednesday is either 6 or 6:30 to about an hour later. We'll post it on our website, but most importantly, you have until February the 28th to file a comment to the park. We'll post some talking points on our website and maybe a generic letter that could be used. I encourage everyone to comment. It can't possibly hurt. The 3 or 4 talking points that we would recommend, and I welcome anyone who has any further ideas, is 1, the parking lot should be considered, maybe think about it in not an impermeable surface, but something that is allows for water, although I guess there's maybe a pollution situation with oil. More importantly, a pollinator friendly creation of the disturbed habitats that parking lots inevitably bring, just based on what we heard earlier today. And in a discussion with our officers earlier today, making sure that the park plants the right plants. Historically, they have planted the wrong plants in that parking lot, so they need to remove not just the exotics, but also the natives that don't belong in the Central Everglades, like mahogany trees, and plant it for butterflies and other insects. And those 2 or 3 points, I think, should be made in any letter that goes to the superintendent, that it's not just mindless planting of plants, even if they're native plants, but it's more thoughtful. And we really should encourage them to create pollinator sites, not necessarily just pretty flowers for butterfly nectaring, but more importantly, host plants. Anyway, so those are 3 things that are going on. There are other issues. The Coral Gables pollinator site has gone dormant a little bit, but I intend to re-engage in that. So I welcome anyone that wants to get involved in any of those 3 or 4 projects. Get in touch with me, and there's more than enough to do. So it's the Florida Bonneted Bat Critical Habitat Designation and the Florida Wilds, the Miami Wilds Project in the Metro Zoo Miami area, the Everglades National Park, Main Park Road, Speed Zone, the Everglades National Park, Shark Valley, improvements to the road and the parking lot, and then finally the Coral Gables pollinator site. Sorry for the fast talking. What's next? Jay, on our agenda. Oh, Mary Rose, do you want to talk about finance? I put you on there. I didn't mean to throw you under the bus. I just wanted to know if there's anything you need to report to us. I want to give you a speaking time. You're on mute, Mary, if you're trying to talk. Well, maybe she's not at her desk.
Yeah, let's just come back to her.
Yeah, Linda and Barbara, upcoming events. I know you guys seem to be more attentive than all the rest of us as to things that are either scheduled or unscheduled, but are in the future. Barbara, do you have anything for us?
Yes, the Miami Blue exhibit is in Miami-Dade County and is slated to be on display at Castillo Hammock, home of the Miami Blue Butterfly chapter of North American Butterfly Association, and that will be announced soon. Because of that, and because of some excellent information that they have prepared, the activity books and the flyers and different things, we've done at the extension a push to get into schools to talk about butterflies and what you need to, everything that you need to know, what our local butterflies are, what their larval hosts are, their preferred nectar sources. And we're starting to work with a couple of new garden sites and some existing old ones. It's actually been really good with outreach. Looks like it's going to be around 500 students when we get through the next 2 months on this. So we're excited about it. Bring some awareness, not just to endangered butterflies, but to those common butterflies, which may be less common.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Barbara. Linda, anything you want to report to the group?
We'll be scheduling the NABA counts shortly. Usually it's June and July. We do the Coral Gables count in June and Shark Valley and Loop Road in July. So we'll post that on the webpage when we have the dates available.
Linda, do we normally do a spring count at Shark Valley, a March count, or am I confusing that with May?
Dennis, I'd have to go back and look at the
Okay.
the prior years.
Okay, all right. And one of the things we talked about in the officers meeting was restarting our field trips, which we are looking to do. We know that, you know, COVID hasn't gone away, even with the fact that vaccines are becoming somewhat available. We're looking to jumpstart our field trips with appropriate precautions. And I don't have anything to propose right now, but it's something that we talked about, and we'll see if we can't get that implemented, because, you know, the butterfly show goes on, and based on some informal walks that have been conducted, there's lots of good stuff out there. And even before the counts get going in May and June. So nothing is imminent, but it's something we're working on to see if we can get that jump started. And again, while there would probably be a limit on the number to maybe 10 participants, so we'll have to have some type of sign in, which is not what we've done in the past, and obviously wearing masks and all that other good stuff. But we're trying to get that going again, and hopefully sooner rather than later. No promises, but maybe even as early as March. It's not just butterflies. We see lots of different things. Linda and a group went down to Flamingo to find the hair streak, the silver banded hair streak, which was located, and they went on down Coastal Prairie Trail and got some great shots of eastern diamondback rattlesnake. So all types of wildlife is out there. Anyway, so it's a good opportunity to see what's going on in and around, including Everglades National Park. There's all types of development in the form of rehabilitation of the facilities. There's I don't forget what they call it, but it's sort of permanent tents, if you will, a camping area that's been created, as well as the campgrounds themselves. So there's lots of developments going on in Everglades National Park. Anyone else want to talk about upcoming events? Okay, before we close, I don't know, Mary Rose, are you with us? And do you want to say anything on the financial side? I don't know if she's still there.
Hello. Wait a minute.
Oh, There she is. Okay.
Okay, sorry. My screen went blank, so. And I don't have anything much to report other than our CD is becoming due, and we will probably just, since there's no opportunity to make money, we will probably just transfer it to a savings account and not tie up the funds until rates get so that we can make a little money. And that's about it. Do you need any details or?
No, that's fine. Again, we will, financially, we're in good order. And I guess to report to the rest of the folks in our officers meeting, we talked about how to properly steward our funds, but not just be a bank, but also use them. So if the membership has ideas, please forward them. Obviously, we're not out to waste money, but there are projects, whether it's science or in academia or in butterfly gardens or some other aspect we can support the science or the propagation of insects, particularly butterflies. It's something that we're committed to do. So I welcome proposals or ideas from anyone on the call to let us know. Again, it's not burning a hole in our pocket, but at the same time, the point is not simply to get money and just invest it and not spend it. So the point is to try to accomplish our goals here. Our next quarterly meeting is essentially 3 months from today or from now, May 2nd. I suspect it will also be virtual, and we will plan accordingly. Sooner or later, we will get back to Castle Hammock, which is, as Barbara noted, our home away from home. And I'll open it to the panelists. Does anyone have anything else on the panel that they want to add?
I have a PS on the Shark Valley issue. That it isn't fair to say or imply in our urging them to do the right thing that they've been doing totally the wrong thing, because they've had a very dedicated volunteer, at least as of a couple years ago, who was planting gardens in the parking lot and around the parking lot and doing a very fine job. And he had nothing to do with the planting of mahogany trees, of course, but it's a very hard place to plant the way it is when you have a narrow strip, like 2 feet wide or something, to make that into a decent garden. So it probably, people shouldn't word it as you've been doing a terrible job out there, but encouraging them to plan the parking area to have large, appropriate areas for gardens.
Enhance. We can
and then-
use the word enhance with appropriate native plant.
Yeah, and then to continue with planning the right things themselves or with their volunteers, whatever. Anyway, it was a volunteer effort that was approved by the park and supported by the park. It was not a bad thing. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, exactly. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar, right? So
And it
yeah,
might have
that's
been,
right.
It might have been flooded, last fall.
Well, the last time I was there, although I don't do that in the count, Linda, I think Linda, it's in your area. The butterfly thing was derelict, but that's the last time I was there, and that was pre-flooding. And I suspect it's the same problem when you have volunteers, unless it's someone that's there all the time. It's the issue that Barbara and I talked about earlier. When the teacher leaves, the thing is ignored. So anyway, yeah, getting someone who would be preferably a park ranger or someone that's on site every day to be in charge of it would be great. But that may be beyond our abilities. Anyway, we'll post some talking points and try to get the superintendent and his minions to do the right thing. Anything else from the panel? All right, guys, thank you. We'll see you on May the 2nd, but before then, if anyone's got anything they want us to be focused on, please email us or call us, and we'll be happy to attend to it. And thanks again for joining us. It was a good meeting.
All right, thank you. Don't forget to check out the website, miamiblue.org.
Yeah,
Thanks,
great
Jay.
to see so many people at this meeting. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And support the purchase of the Pine Rock land, whether it's what was originally chosen or not. I don't think we really talked about that in the public meeting, did we?
We haven't.
Yeah, that's the, this is mentioned on our website. It's the, and we should have asked Jeff to address that. He talked about an area, you know, he had identified a handful of places in the United States that NABA was interested in. One was Pine Rocklands, but there is an active effort to acquire a specific piece of property in southern Miami-Dade County that would be supply some connectivity for Pine Rocklands, and that effort is ongoing. So there's a fundraising, a GoFundMe page that is referenced, I think, and linked on our website. So everyone should look at that and know that your financial support would, I'm sure NABA would say your financial support would be appreciated. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
See you all later.
Thank you, Jay.